Let's speak to Marco Chan, Senior Lecturer in Aviation Operations at Buckinghamshire's new University School of Aviation and Security. It's good to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time this morning. I'm sure you have seen the images of the collision that happened just before 9 o'clock local time last night. What did you make of it?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And first of all, my condolences to the family and of the accident. Very quickly, we've got limited information here today, and new information seems to be coming out every other minute. However, with what we've got, it appears to be a nighttime operation. Visibility, while, as we understand from President Donald Trump's tweet as well, it should be clear skies. It is, but however, it was a nighttime operation, so the visibility is obscured. It appears there was a late change of runway for the crew as well. Sounds like a very high workload environment to me. And with the early interview as well with the correspondent, we can hear that the runway 01 and runway 33, the eventual landing runway, requires special training to operate into due to terrain and its proximity to the White House airspace area as well, requiring special visual approach towards the runway. And it sounds like a collision happened really late on as well in final approach, 0.6 nautical miles from the landing runway. And with the latest ATC conversation now, I don't know whether they appear to be on the same frequency, which I'll come on to a bit later on, but very from what I've heard with the ATC conversation, it appears the ATC was instructing the helicopter pilots, first of all, to clarify whether they have visual with the CRJ700, and if so, they would have to take off or maneuver behind the CRJ700 once they're clear of the traffic.
Who has the right of way, as it were?
Now, normally in this situation, the commercial jet, because it is already on a final approach, it is a larger traffic, so to speak, with helicopter usually maneuvering around these commercial jets. So quite often, unless for whatever reason the military helicopter is in fact carrying out a military operation with urgency, normally the commercial jet would have the right of way, since they are on shore front, very close to the runway. If the helicopter, for whatever reason, was given the right of way, the CRJ700 commercial jet would have been asked to carry out a missed approach to go around to abort the landing.
Yeah, I go around. I'm sure many of our viewers will have heard that phrase before. I've been on helicopters before when we've been advised by air traffic control to get out of the way. They can move and readjust their flight path very quickly, can't they?
Exactly. So the helicopter is more agile and more maneuverable compared to commercial jets. And plus, if they're that close to a runway for a landing, it would not be reasonable to ask commercial jets just to go do a go around. Instead, ask the helicopter whether they can see the traffic, and second of all, avoid the traffic.
Yeah, I mean, we believe from air traffic control that they asked a couple of times whether they could see the soldiers on the training flight, the Black Hawk, whether they could see the commercial jet. And eventually they said, Pat 25 passed behind the CRJ. Can you tell us what that actually means?
Yeah, so appears they have a confirmation of the visual, what we call the visual eye, seeing the actual aircraft, the traffic, to pass behind the traffic, to mean let the CRJ700 move ahead first, and then you maneuver behind the traffic to avoid the collision if it was at all an issue. Now, other issues I believe the investigators will be looking at is on board the commercial jets, we have what we call the TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system. So normally with traffic around, it would show us how far and what's the proximity to us. And usually it would give out traffic advisory or resolution advisory, i.e. to tell you to climb, to descend, or to tell you how close the proximity is in terms of the imminent impact. Now, for military traffic, quite a lot of times for operational reasons, they would inhibit that part of the transponder signal. So it works on, if you will, a transponder signal. So one aircraft sends a signal to the other aircraft, it receives it, so it knows where they are in proximity and in relation to the aircraft. So military aircraft a lot of times would inhibit that function, and understandably for military operation. So that would be another question they would want to know, because without that, the commercial jet would have no idea the helicopter is indeed around in terms of monitor display. Another issue to think about is, while there is an ATC conversation there, were they on the same frequency? Were the pilots performing the landing? Were they privy to that conversation? Because a lot of military traffic would operate on a separate frequency, again, for operational reasons.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, PAT 25, that would have been the call sign, would it, for the Black Hawk?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
yes,
and
yes.
CRJ is the commercial jet?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. There was little, I'm guessing, that the aircraft could have done. It was 30 seconds or so before landing, perhaps even less than that.
Indeed, I mean, there's very little at night time as well. It's very difficult to visually check the traffic apart from the strips, the lights that they have, the beacon, for example, and plus they were flying at a relatively higher speed than the helicopter. And doing the final approach, they would be very focused and concentrated on the actual approach, the landing on the runway. So it would be very difficult to do anything on the end.
Having looked at the images of the moments before the collision, it does look as though the helicopter is coming in behind and to the side of the jet. How much do you think those in the cockpit of the jet would have been able to see?
It would be very difficult. I'll be very honest. The commercial jet, the CRJ, was again, it was flying at a relatively high speed. It doesn't look like so on the video, but it is operating at a fairly high speed for the landing. And they probably wouldn't have been able to see the helicopter, because it would have been under the wing, if you will, and flying towards the tail. And the pilots in the cockpit, they are at the front. So it would be very difficult for them to spot the helicopter.
Would they have been aware of what traffic control was saying, or, as you suggested previously, potentially they were on different frequencies?
Yeah, if they were on the same frequency, then they would have knowledge of that. So in operational environment, when there's helicopter operating around, my personal experience as well, when we're doing a final approach, for example, and when we hear the conversation between the helicopter pilots and the air traffic control, we would immediately try to locate the traffic. And obviously the air traffic control, again, would try to convey the news to us to say there's a helicopter around. Do you have visual with the helicopter? And this would be the normal operation as well. Military traffic could be on a different regulation or different sets of coordination. Indeed, if they were on a different frequency, it would be very difficult for the air traffic controllers to coordinate that.
OK. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. Thank you.